Choo-choo! Welcome to Queued Up. I'm your host, CJ. With me, Eli the Ninja, the one and only tumbleweed Kepley, and the Tad Lock Davis. What's going on, guys? Good to see you.
It's been a whole week.
It has been a whole week. There's been some esports action that's happened at this point, and we're gonna talk about some esports things today. First, we're gonna visit some Counter-Strike, then we're gonna go talk some League of Legends, some Valorant, and then end it with some Call of Duty. But getting right into the action, Counter-Strike. It's been an awesome event for the Blast Spring Open, and we have seen a ton of overtime matches. So I'm going to walk through a couple of them. We got Virtus Pro versus Falcons, a Game 3 Inferno, 22-20, so that's 3 overtimes. We got Navi Mongols, Game 3, 1 overtime. We got Furia and M80, which is a double overtime, that's a 2 overtime. And then we got Spirit versus MOUZ, and that was 4 overtime matches. Is Kepley, I'm coming to you first, okay? This is the action. You have it right here, okay? Is this just close Counter-Strike? Are all these teams just closely matched? Or are we just seeing some craziness going on with the map pools and everything else going on?
I think we're starting to see that a lot of these rosters are more even than folks had maybe realized at first. So it's not just like a two-horse show anymore. You're not just seeing Spirit versus Vitality. I think all these other teams are starting to step up in that equation, right? M80 put on a great show against Mongols early on, but I think Mongols edged them out in that. Like you said, VP, Virtus Pro, Falcons, Navi, right? These are all great teams. It's just a matter of who shows up more on that day and what the map pick is.
Yeah, I think the one specifically that hit me was the Spirit and MOUZ overtime. What do you think MOUZ is doing on that ancient map to make it go overtime, Davis? What is it? Is it just a crazy matchup between those two teams that we've seen, and what's going on with those teams?
Yeah, well, I want to speak to how MOUZ has really been able to just deliver in the clutch in the last few events. I mean, they have really cemented themselves as a top team, winning the last 2 events and then doing what they've done so far through Blast. I think it speaks a lot to their mental toughness and how just being comfortable in the moment that they are. And even facing a team like Spirit that has a lot of hype and actually really shut them down a couple maps ago, be able to respond like that, even though it did go so far into overtime on Ancient, I think that they played a very good map and ended up taking it away. So very good.
Yeah. One of the things that I see when I watch it is I'm not sure sometimes if it's folks making mistakes or if it's just clean and crisp, or like those big moments are coming out from big players. So Eli, what do you think? Is it just inconsistency of teams, or are they just making big plays and big moments for the forces overtimes?
I think there's differences in maturity between the teams. I mean, for Spirit specifically, you've got Donk, who is a superstar for sure, but he's also still very young, which means emotional maturity maybe not quite there. We've seen him get very emotional when he has a rough round, pounding on the desk, and just getting very frustrated. And I think the team that has a lot of mental toughness and kind of just takes it game by game or round by round, I mean, whichever in-game leader has more experience is going to probably just narrowly edge out the other side, right? It becomes a mind game. And quadruple overtime, it's just how can you outwit your opponent? Can you predict what they're going to go for and then counter it? And I think that MOUZ in-game leader, Bolin, has been making phenomenal plays for that.
Yeah, Cap, looks like Donk was slaying in this game. He dropped 30 plus. I don't know if it's him making plays in those clutch moments or more of that team coming together. What do you think about the Spirit side, especially on that overtime?
I think that folks are learning kind of a formula to handle Spirit, and it's not like it's an easy formula. It's that you have to shut down Donk, right? Because I think that a lot of the emotions, as Eli said, around that team kind of play off of how Donk's feeling, because you can see Donk have those outbursts, and it probably demoralizes the rest of the team a little bit. But specifically, right, I noted that Donk and Shiro typically tend to be their best 2 players on the team. So Shiro's kind of that backbone, but otherwise, I think MOUZ did a really good job of preparing strats to play around Donk, whether that be to eliminate Donk early or just go to parts of the map that Donk doesn't cover and then let Donk play those retakes, so that way they can isolate him off in those 1v1s. And eventually, right, you put 3-on-1 with Donk, he's not going to win that. It's just when Donk gets to those 1v1 scenarios that he really pops off.
It's so fun to watch the overtimes. As a viewer, it's like you get stressed for them.
Yeah.
So did you see any of those stressful moments, Davis, from any of the players as you were watching that overtime?
100%. I mean, to go 4 overtime, that's so back and forth. Really, any round could swing any different way with how good these teams are and how they're playing. There was a lot of moments, but like we said, MOUZ was able to keep their mental and I think persevere in the end.
Yeah, torzsi with the op. I think made a couple of big plays on that side. Just playing that long side is just wild.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can just immediately delete somebody from the equation, it's going to make the rest of the play so much easier. And he did that pretty much the entire end of the last overtime. Like 3 rounds in a row, he's just hitting op after op, and that's hard to play against.
Yeah. But we'll still be watching some Counter-Strike. This has been an awesome event. I feel like we just watched ESL and there was not as many overtimes. It was kind of like very clear cut. But seeing the switch up has been really exciting. So hopefully we see some more overtimes as this keeps going on. We're going to jump into the playoffs. But one of the things that we've been talking about with the playoffs is Vitality's currently on a 14-game win streak. They cannot lose. They are kicking everybody's butt. I don't know, Kepley, do you think that they just haven't been tested yet, or you think it's something where they're just showing up on every occasion?
I think they're the most consistent player in terms of the sense that all their players can step up and shine. So player for player, I think they're good. I think Spirit leans too heavy on Donk right now. I think like Magics and stuff need to step up and shine more. Vitality are just that total package. The roster's been together. I mean, 4 of their players have been together for years, and I think their newest player, he's only been on the roster for like 4 or 5 months, something like that. So Vitality definitely has that total package, but there are some chinks in the armor. I mean, it's hard to say, but if you look at their performance over the past few months, you definitely don't want to play them on like Train, Inferno, or Dust because they haven't lost that map at all. But their weakest map is actually Anubis. So I think that's why, like in their recent match against Mongols tried to take Vitality to Anubis, but Vitality pulled that out. So if they start locking down and getting better at Anubis, then they really don't. Their other 2 maps, Mirage and Nuke, they have an 80% win rate on. So they're just consistent all around the board.
Excuse me. Tough to beat a team that has a lot of good maps. Davis, if you were going to play against Vitality right now, would you try and take any of those maps, or do you think it doesn't matter, you just have to slay out in those moments?
I mean, definitely try to get one of those maps. I mean, if it's statistically their worst map, then you try anything you can because nobody can beat these guys. I think, kind of to touch on what you said with how they can lean on anybody on their team to carry. If one guy's not here playing good, okay, we have 4 other guys that can do it. And that really helps with the confidence of the players too. I think whenever you're on a roster where maybe you feel like you're holding everybody up, if I can't do it, if I'm not playing good, the confidence from the whole team just drops. And so I think they have a really special thing going on right now. They're going to ride that high, and they're hot, but eventually it will end. It'll be interesting to see, how it comes to an end, but ride it while you can.
Yeah, one thing I want to touch on that I think could be a factor is, they're in these studio matches right now. So they're really close to the team. It's easy for Apex to shout across and get in the head of the other players. So when you transition that and they go to like one of their big majors where they're in a stadium and they're not as close, they can't get in that mental game as much. I wonder if that's when a team could upset Vitality. Because I think Vitality's playing both good physical and mental warfare, physical, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, when you can look across at the other guy and be like, hey, you suck. Like,
yeah,
I'd be like, I do suck.
And don't lose to them ever. You suck. I'm not
He's right, I don't belong here.
Yeah.
Eli, I want to ask you about siuhy on that roster. Clearly showing up, making huge plays for that team. What do you think? Is it just him, or do you think they're all helping him, or what's going on with him specifically?
I mean, it's impossible for one man to carry the show, but I will say siuhy is making a case to be the greatest player of all time. If he continues on the path that he's on right now for another 3 years, people are going to be talking about him in the conversation with Simple as the GOAT. I mean, he's looking that good. A 1.69 rating against Virtus Pro was insane. His rating is constantly at the top of the charts. I mean, he's been a top player for the last 5 years or so, but it just feels like he's getting even better. But I do think that the rest of the team, deserves some flowers as well. I mean, you're talking about Rops, Mezzy, Flames. All these guys are often in people's top 10 players overall in the league right now. So I think that even if he is having a slightly off game, which honestly doesn't even seem possible with how consistent he's been, but in case that he does, I'm confident in his teammates to step it up.
Yeah. One of the things that we saw on Anubis was Flames was in a smoke and got a 3K, and he did it with a knife. He just threw it out there. And one of the things that you can see kind of in the body language of the players on Vitality is that they're being really confident in their challenges. Davis, tell me, when you look at that and you see that team doing that, like when they're playing that way, does it make them almost more challenging to play against?
I think so, 100%, because like you said, you can see the confidence, and they're not scared to take risks. They're not scared to try different things because they know, even if I take this risk, okay, I'll just go back to my bread and butter play and we'll beat you on it. So I think that really, the fact that they are able to pull off plays like this shows just how good they are and the form that they are on right now.
Yeah, it's wild. Playoffs are just starting. That last match ended. We actually just saw the Mongols get knocked out by G2, which is a little bit sad over here. RIP Mongols. We wanted to see them go further. But it will be an exciting finals. We'll see if Vitality is able to take it again or if it's going to be somebody else. But we'll be covering that on Monday. But I'm going to switch gears on you real quick. We're going to jump to some League of Legends. I'm actually going to throw it over to my man Kepley. If you could just introduce the structure of the League of Legends and when the splits are starting and all these different pieces, that would be amazing, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you have your global regions, right? And so we haven't seen all the schedules fleshed out as far as like who's matching up with who. So I dug up these dates the best that I could. So hopefully I'm not wrong on anything. I forgot to write down the date, so I'm just toggling.
No, I got it right here.
You got it right here?
Yeah, so LEC is going to start in Europe at 3/29.
This
March
weekend.
29th. Yeah,
Yep.
this weekend. And then LCK is going to start basically the same weekend too.
On April 2nd.
And then LTA will start this weekend for week. No, it's going to be this.
It's next weekend, April 5th weekend.
Yep.
Is when that starts. So, so you can look forward to Europe and Korea. We haven't got the matchups yet on how that's going to play out, but there's a lot of good teams in those regions, so stuff to look out for. LTA starting up. It is starting up on that April 5th weekend, and we do have some changes to the format, which I think will be exciting. So they're really trying to show that they're listening to the players. They're trying to show that they want to appease now. There's a lot of popularity in this fearless draft system, but they also have their goals where they want to try to get teams matched up against each other early on with that pool play. So one of the things they're doing is they're dividing it kind of half and half in a way. So weeks 1 through 3, we get that best of 1 round robin between all the teams. And then they're going to do a snake style ranking system where they go into two different groups, right?
Yep.
So you had group A, B, now you've kind of got C, D group, right? And they're going to have best of 3 playoffs. And then that's going to end up in your bracket where you get your best of 5 for the finals. And one thing to note for all of these regions, including LPL, which we'll talk about in a minute, is the top two teams in each league. They qualify not only for MSI, which is Riot's sanctioned international tournament, but also the Esports World Cup.
Both double whammy, get them all.
Yeah.
Top 6 teams going there. It was interesting, Kep. You showed us kind of a little bit of that structure, but based off of last season, what was it? Was it all best of 1s throughout the beginning of the split?
Yeah, there wasn't enough fearless draft for folks. It kind of came into the playoffs, if I recall correctly. But since fearless draft has risen so much in popularity, because we didn't know that fearless draft was going to be all year long, right? Which, in me, it was an obvious thing when they introduced it, but they tested it for split 1. And then after they saw the popularity of it, because I guess they thought players wouldn't like diversity in champ pool for some reason, then they were like, okay, cool, now we can adopt this going forward. So it's kind of changed how they're redoing it. They're also doing split 3 a little different than split 2. They already announced that, but we'll talk more about that later as we get closer to it.
Yeah, Davis, coming to you next. Ultimately, we saw a bunch of different notes in the community of folks in LTA saying, hey, we don't really like best of 1s. So do you think this is more fearless driven, or do you think this is more community driven on this decision?
I think it's a combination of both. I think that obviously, fans are going to watch the game regardless. They obviously usually always want more games as a fan. You want to watch your team play as much as you can, and that might be not what the players want. But I think truly this was more fearless draft driven because, like you said, last split there were so many games of 1, and there's really no point in having a fearless draft if you're just going to play 1 match because there's no champions being eliminated. And so I truly think that it's really more based on the fearless system and trying to implement that further. And I really enjoy the fearless system, so looking forward to it.
Yeah. Kep, do you think there's going to be a big shift in the top teams that we saw from the first stand tournament, or do you think it's pretty much status quo?
There's a possibility you'll see all those teams again. But, kind of like I touched on before that, KC didn't really deserve to be there, right? That was kind of a bold statement. KC did show that they did deserve, but KC, G2's predominantly been better in Europe, right? So you're going to see probably G2, right? But KC might show up. Fnatic's also in that conversation. LCK is another interesting one, right? Because we got Hanawa, which, there's so many teams in Korea that could go there, but, I noticeably call out like Genji or SKT1, right? So those are 2 teams that have been international before, fans are familiar with. LCP, I think you'll actually see the Oysters again, but the only team that seems kind of close to them is the Talons, PSG Talons.
Yeah.
LPL, I mean, that is just like a hornet's nest. There's so many good teams there, but seeing Top Esports, that's a team that I expect to see again, but Billy Gaming could be there. JDG. There's another team that's kind of newer to the scene that hasn't made international. Anyone's Legend. They did really well last split. They could have been there. Like, there's a lot of arguments you can make. And then just from North America, our favorite, man. I mean, like, it was crazy that Liquid got there. They're a top performing team, but FlyQuest, 100 Thieves, C9, it's kind of the best that North America's looked in a while, which hopefully we get better so we can make more of an international statement, but we get 2 international chances. So, you could really see none of those teams. You could see all of them. The only one that I truly expect to see guaranteed repeat, though, is Flying Oyster.
Really?
Yep.
That's crazy. I know we were all kind of on the KC hater bandwagon because of First Stand.
Yeah.
For the first 2 matches, and then they beat Top, and it was like, whoa, what has changed for these guys? So it'll be interesting. I'm really excited to see that region because G2 is definitely a name that you keep saying that I haven't seen much of, so I'm excited to see those guys. And see.
Yeah, Caps is often referred to as like the best player ever in the West.
Yeah.
So being the mid laner there for G2, they just always have good international show performances. Fnatic, they're making a name for themselves. They dropped off for a little while, but used to be Europe. I mean, back in my day, right? It was always G2 versus Fnatic, right? That's what it always ended up to be. And now it's nice to see Fnatic come back into the picture. So.
Another thing I want to touch on is kind of with the implementation of more best of 3s, best of 5s. I think that will help eliminate teams that shouldn't be there. It gives you three games to prove who's better. It's not just a 1-to-1 who wins this game goes. It's a series, and we'll see who's actually better.
No, I agree.
Yeah, and we see with this. I mean, I'm a fan of this not doing best of 1s, especially because we've talked about this before. But like the roster depth, right? Like who do we have, and how do you get there? And I think in some ways, a lot of these teams can win one game. Like you can kind of get lucky with a champ select and then win a lane and then have somebody kind of snowball and win that fight. And then you have this. So these weeks like 1 to 3 of best of 1 round robins kind of get lost. So from a player perspective, I could see them being like, oh, we definitely want a best of 3 so we can kind of find the depth of our champions, specifically for teams that really need to stretch that to be able to find a win.
Yep, I agree. I mean, we've seen it's best of 3 is not a stranger to North America, so it is newer and more hypey because of Fearless Draft. But back when it was called NALCS, they tried like a full season of best of 3s, and it just didn't have the viewership from a number like rating perspective that they would hope for. So that's actually why they went back to best of 1s. So that's probably why they're hesitant to pull the trigger on Fearless Draft as much. But we'll see.
I will say it's kind of understandable for them to do best of 1s when the seeding is based on the best of 3s in the prior split. So it's like if you're upset that you only got a best of 1 chance to beat the team, it's like maybe you should have got a better seed in the last split. You had a chance to give yourself a better shot. So plus there's just so many teams in China. It's like it's so impossible to play that many games when there's that many teams. It makes sense to at least have a section of it best of 1, but I'm glad to see the changes to where it later turns to best of 3s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually running through the numbers earlier with the LPL, and I totaled up. It would take almost 40 if you played the most possible games throughout your entire series. You would play close to 45 different matches before you got eliminated fully.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Fully 45 league matches. So.
And that's a lot of league matches.
Yeah. That's a long time.
I'm uninstalling by like 15. So.
That's one of the things that's kind of tough as a viewer. So like we've talked about it offline, but I guess just to say it officially, like we'll mainly focus on North America, right? Yeah. But every region has their own different take. And so as a viewer, it can get, if you're not like a true fan, it can get really confusing on what you're watching, right? Because LPL's got 4 different groups. They're all doing their own round robin best of 1. So we'll hone in on LTA. And then if there's any hot action, I'll let you know. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, the one that's currently going on, LPL did start about a week earlier, so we did get to see some matches from there. And there were some upsets. Ultimately, I think I'm going to jump right to you on this, Eli, in the LPL division. But there's 4 groups for these guys, and the biggest upset that we saw was JD was able to take down Invictus. Oh, sorry, lost to Invictus Gaming. Eli, tell me a little bit about that match and why you think that happened that way.
Yeah, I was watching the match. It was a best of 1, so there's only so much that you can glean from it. But in that specific game, I mean, Invictus is not a bad team. They've got some standout players. JJ. In the jungle was playing Sejuani and set up the mid laner playing Yone. Sorry, that was Rookie. Sorry, all these teams get mixed up. But JJ and Rookie had some crazy team combos and just turned the tide of those fights. Eventually, they start snowballing. Gala gets massive fed on Ezreal. He's hitting every single Q, every single ultimate. And it's like they had kind of a top tier performance from their caliber comparatively to last split. So it makes sense how they're able to overcome JDG in a best of one. But that's why I like the best of three. It's like, I feel like if JD had a few more opportunities and they had the fearless draft enacted and, you know, they could show their diverse champ pool, they could have came back in that series in theory. But got to give credit to IG. The cool thing is, though, for JD, it's like, yeah, they're going to finish second in their pool, which means they're going to start in lower bracket. But if you look at the last split, Top also started in lower bracket as second in their pool, and they just made a crazy losers run. So if JD really is the truth, they're going to be able to prove it in the bracket stage.
Yeah, I mean, last split, we were looking at JDG as possibly being the team that would go to first stand, right? I mean, other than them, it was anyone's legend. Just the way that the bracket ended up playing out, man. I mean, JDG just fell into an unfortunate situation with a hot top esports.
Well, I mean, you were saying earlier that like this is like the group of death, right? So any of these guys can cut.
Yeah, I mean that. I feel like almost every year we see a new Chinese team that comes to Worlds or comes to an international stage. They're all so dominant. I mean, even like the teams that placed low, like Weibo, right? Weibo could be there, and then this split we're starting to see Up is the team. I actually don't know what Up stands for. I forgot to look that up, but Up, you know, they're looking hot too, man. I mean, so you could see none of the teams that I mentioned. Ninjas in Pajama, that's an old org that's over there in LPL now. Yeah. And I mean, everyone's saying, where's TSM? Apparently TSM is working on putting together a team and coming back in the LPL.
Up is Ultra Prime, by the way.
Ultra Prime, thank you.
Ultra Prime, I did see that, yeah, Ultra Prime. Interesting. Yeah, I love to see, it's also weird to see NIP because they're so big in Counter-Strike. Yeah. It's just like they kind of made this leap in a different world completely.
Yeah.
But that, I mean, the LPL, I think a lot of these matches and groups, it's fun to see names that we know. It'll be exciting to see who kind of is able to fight their way through this. And ultimately, they do get a ticket to the Esports World Cup and MSI. And so there'll be a lot of opportunities for these teams to show up right now today so that they can compete in some other stuff going forward. So we'll be eyes on that. But switching gears, going to the next thing, we had some Valorant matches this weekend through BCT Americas. We're going to start at the top here. NRG versus Cloud9. Not the way we thought it would go. But I don't know. Tell me, Davis, you gave this one a look. Tell me about these teams. Tell me about what happened here, you think?
Yeah, well, I want to say I think this is actually going to end up being a really important match for these teams. I see a lot of these teams in this second group that are very closely matched, and only 3 teams make it out of it. Yeah. They're going against teams like, you know, Leviathan, NRG, C9, MIBR is in that same group. So we got a lot of good teams that are fighting for 3 spots. It'll be interesting to see who comes out. NRG, I did think would come away with the dub, but you know, obviously it didn't happen. Good game from both sides, though, I will say. Tough game, close game.
Yeah.
Yeah, Zeppa and Oxy really popped off there for Cloud9. I mean, each one kind of carrying their own map. So I think no one on there, if you did like a fantasy roster or whatever, like a bracket, I don't think anyone saw Cloud9 coming off hot like this.
No,
so,
I mean,
big upset.
And them taking that fracture too is just like kind of an off map for everybody. I think it's normally T-sided because you can just kind of slam and get somebody in there. I say T-sided, attack-sided.
Yeah. I still call it T and CT.
NRG coming in as the 2nd seed, and they're losing to the 7th seed.
I know.
So it's like, that's tough for them because now they feel like they must win their next 2 matches to make it out. So that's tough.
Yeah, and then we saw Crew and Loud. This was another upset on that side. Loud has been dominant in a lot of ways, but they showed up on the first map, which was Fractured 13-3, and then the next 2, they kind of just fumbled. I say that the game 3 was closer. I say that as you watch it, it didn't really feel that close because that split is it's just a lopsided map. You know, you either are CT heavy and T heavy depending on who's watching, and so that one became a little bit of the T-sided battle where everyone was just taking the site and being able to get the spike down. But Crew came out on top on that one. But really the match that we were all looking at for this weekend was Sentinels and 100 Thieves. That was the big one. Those 2 big names. Those 2 have kind of had a history and are probably the biggest names within the North American group right now. But what do you think, Kepley? What do you think about Sentinels in this one? They take it away 2-1 in a not close game 3.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really surprised by the result. I know that a lot of people They just like to say rivalry, right? Because Sentinels versus 100 Thieves, but it's not even really rivalry. I mean, Sentinels has kind of always had 100 Thieves number. I think they're like 10-4 overall every time they've met. I think like one of the big questions for Sentinels this time was like, oh, well, Tens is gone, right? So he's not on the roster, but it's their second time playing without Tens, but can they still have that dominant performance, the dominant look? And I think they answered very confidently yes, right? They did drop that game too. I feel like they were maybe just having some fun and they just made sure to silence all the doubters in game 3.
Yeah, the Haven was the game 2. It went 13-9 for 100 Thieves.
Yeah.
And it's interesting in Valorant, you see those like 13-9, 13-10s. They can be close, but they can also look so lopsided. I think it did look closer, as I was it passed the eye test for both teams. But the split was not close at all, a 13-1 on the back end. We saw Bang show up for both those maps. You want to talk a little bit about that, Davis, that player kind of showing up for him?
Yeah, pretty insane, playing against his old team, a big narrative there, really stepped up big for Sentinels. But I kind of want to talk about, like you said, split and how CT-sided is it? Because in my opinion, from playing this map, it's very CT-sided. And I think Sentinels was very lucky to get the CT side first to go ahead and establish a lead. I think if 100 Thieves was able to get on CT first and build some momentum of their own, it could be very different. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of split, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Eli, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Bang is just saying, hey, this is why I left this team. I mean, straight up. He went insane. I want to say like 1.32 KD, 1.32 rating with 139 damage per round, which is pretty crazy for an average. He just popped off on the Omen and the Astra. He was looking like the best player in the lobby by far, in my opinion, and kind of made 100 Thieves look silly. And I think this is a big bounce back for Sentinels. They did finish 7th, 8th in the last major, and in a lot of people's eyes, maybe underperformed, should have gotten further. And now they're like, okay, let's start off the next split with a bang, no pun intended. And they absolutely did.
Yeah, I feel like that's always been the narrative for Sentinels. I mean, anytime they go to these majors, they're so good in North America. Then when you go global, it's just like something always happens. There's something off with the formula, and like you can never quite put your finger on it, but it's not the same team. And so I think Sentinels, they have a lot to prove, at least for me historically watching that org. I'd love to see them finally get like a chip.
Yeah, Saken showed up and had a lot of first bloods in that last map too. And there were several times when Sentinels was actually down players and they just kind of clutched up. And so that's a snowballing map, like I said, once you start rolling the rounds together and making those clutches happen. But that was one of those, that was a good match ultimately until you got to the game 3. And sometimes it is fun to just watch somebody get steamrolled. So it kind of happened on that side.
I had to see Nadeshot's reaction.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Nadeshot had a tough weekend in some other areas too. As we switch over to the Call of Duty side of things, the Dallas major, Optic's home major, and Optic just made this big roster change with Skies. Ultimately, I think all eyes were on Optic for this one. But Eli, what did it feel like watching the first Optic match?
I mean, to be honest, it's kind of exactly what I expected. They beat Minnesota, which they're supposed to beat Minnesota. Skies didn't look that great. I mean, he was doing a lot of objective, but KD-wise was underperforming a bit. But he's very new. I mean, he's been on the roster for, 5 days? Like, this, you can't expect a lot from a guy. He's still trying to figure out how to get comfortable, how he fits into this group. So they win that series 3-0, but then in the very next series, they get 3-0'd. So it's like, Skies, I feel like he hasn't had a chance yet to really show what he can bring to this team. And once they have a little bit more time to cook in the kitchen, maybe we'll see the team get a little better.
Yeah, I think the big question there is, is the Skies change alone enough? Because, one of the things that happens after the second major is, you get roster mania. So there's, all the rumors of, are they going to change more, right? Are they going to swap out, torzsi, right? He's kind of having a rough time, as opposed to Kenny, but I agree with your point. I mean, I think a lot of people were saying Optic was the same. It's like, well, duh. I mean, the roster's 4 days old.
You're right.
So even still, I think that speaks more to the player caliber of Optic, and also shows kind of the flaws of Rocker, that they couldn't beat a team that has no synergy. So I don't know. Interested to see how the league evolves there, but Optic, to me, they did well, right? The fact that you got to win, sometimes you just need that spark to start change. So we'll see. Hopefully they ride that momentum.
Yeah, Davis, how they look against the Ultra?
That's what I wanted to say. I was actually pleased with it. They got to win against. To bounce off, I heard you say Ultra, but I want to talk about. This team improved. If we look at how they did in the qualifiers, and you look to them now, it was way better. They were the first KD team for Control and the second team for Search and Destroy throughout the entire event. So they've solved the problem of being able to get kills now. The thing I want to talk about with them is their team play, though, and I think it's atrocious. I don't think they get any pressure off any kills that they get, and that's really the main problem of this. Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
No, you're good. No, I love
Going to Ultra now, though.
I mean, the Optic and Ultra, I mean, I think the two series are crazy because, like, Optic looked pretty good against Minnesota, and I think they were starting to get the legs, you know, underneath them and starting to walk, you know, as going from a crawling baby to what they are now. But then they do face a good Ultra, you know, an Ultra that probably shouldn't have lost in the winners round that they did. And so it's like, when you look at that, it's like tough bracket situation for Optic on that side.
Yeah, 100%. Like you just said, I mean, Ultra played tremendous in this tournament together. They were attached at the hip, getting trades, working together, getting pressure. And I think that was really exposed against Optic, that their team play was just a lot better. Individually, they're very similarly matched, maybe Optic even being, you know, better in that department. But obviously, you see what team play can do for you.
Yeah, and you know, it's always a win because Joe Deceives didn't break his own record that he set against Optic like 2 weeks ago, right? So it's the small wins, right? They add up, but that just shows that Joe couldn't quite pop off as hard, right, against this Optic roster, even though they still fell in
I
the end.
mean, all the Optic haters are probably clowning on them. Oh, you guys got 3-0'd by Ultra, but then fast forward the next couple of rounds, Ultra 3-0s Boston Breach, then 3-0s LA Thieves, the #1 seed coming into the tournament, and then people are like, okay, maybe Optic getting 3-0'd wasn't that bad because they're kind of on fire and destroying everybody. Finally meeting the brick wall that was Vancouver. Surge, we got to talk about them.
Yeah, we do have to talk to Surge. I am going to switch gears on this a little bit, and I want to follow the Thieves journey next. I just want to jump over to the Thieves, and then we'll come back to the Surge and Cloud9 and Ultra. The Thieves start as the #1 seed walking into this. They play against the Boston Breach, who 2 weeks ago against FaZe almost won in a game 5. You know, it was around 11, it was close. Breach comes out swinging, takes the Thieves down, and sends them into a loser's bracket run where they take down the Heretics, the Royal Ravens, Cloud9, and then lose to that Ultra team that was hot at the time. You know, I think, Kep, when I look at this Thieves team, it's like, I expected a lot more from them, I think, in the round 1, but maybe they got an unlucky matchup. But they did make quite the loser's bracket run, even though there's a little bit of hate on them right now.
Yeah, the only surprise at how this played out to me is that Boston Breach is the one that knocked them to losers, right? And that's not like a knock on Boston because they did have that highlight moment. But Thieves, I don't know. I feel like I've seen this in all their esports. Whatever goes on over there in the LA Thieves world, they always seem to start slow at these events, right? And so you have a team that can capitalize on that. You'll knock them down early. Like I remember watching COD a few years back, and you know Kenny and team, they'd always come to like Worlds or a major. They'd lose that first game or whatever, and then they just steamroll losers bracket, right? But you start to look at these teams that they beat after that. You know, Heretics, no surprise. Royal Ravens, no surprise. C9, no surprise. And then you get to Toronto Ultra, and I think that the story there is actually a little deeper. I think Joe had a talk before the team, Joe Deceives, and he said, guys, we're not fucking losing this game, right? Like, they dropped me. I know it was a different game, but I've got something to prove here on this major, right? And Call of Duty is a game where online, I mean, the events matter just enough to get you to the event, but LAN is what matters. And so when Joe Deceive stepped on that stage, I think he just had a bigger purpose to play for, and Ultra just ran all over them. And I don't think Thieves had that motivation. I mean, you've got a lot of pressure, right? You've got your CEO, I think he still is, Nate Shot, right? Just hounding on you online constantly over these online qualifiers and in these majors. And then you get there and Toronto Ultra just starts slapping you. I think it's hard to regain momentum and, you know, a strong mental fortitude from there.
Absolutely. Yeah, that Thieves series, for anybody who was wondering, Ultra win 250 to 115 on a protocol hardpoint. This scoreline makes it look like close. It was not close. It was a 6-4 against the Thieves on Hacienda Search and Destroy, and then they 3-0 Thieves, which the stats on the Thieves in Control has been #1 team by far, almost unbeatable. Eli, what do you think happened in that series with the Ultra specifically?
I mean, that's literally the first time that the Thieves have lost control on protocol since this season began. So it feels like Ultra just caught fire. I mean, like Kep said, Joe Deceives he's playing for a purpose maybe even bigger than himself. He's like, I want to beat these guys. They were the ones to drop me. I want to prove that they made a mistake. And sometimes that will can like force you to start thinking faster in the game and start predicting your opponent's next step. It's also the fact that he's been on that team and played with these players before. So if he knows their strategies, he's probably saying they're going to wrap around this side of the map, and he's coming up with strategies to play against that. So they just look like, I don't know, they had so much momentum. I mean, they started in lower bracket 1, 3-0 Gorilla Mates, 3-0 Optic, 3-0 Boston Breach. So they're going into the LA Thieves match having won the last 9 maps in a row. So they kind of are clicking. They can feel their timings. Everything's working. Communication's flowing. They're trusting each other. There's a lot of dopamine flowing through those bodies. And they're able to overcome Thieves, who were kind of having a down weekend. They didn't expect to just get upset in the first round. I mean, that was kind of the opposite tale for them. And that's what happens when they clash.
Yeah, and there were 2 listen-ins for the Thieves. And when you listen to it, the small talk didn't feel like it was there, Davis. It was like, it was just very general. Hey, he's this spot, right? It wasn't about the next play coming up. It was like reactive instead of proactive. Did you feel like that when you were listening to the comms as well?
I did. I felt like their comms were really off, especially when you compare it to other teams that were playing so well throughout the tournament. I think comms were much clearer from teams like Surge and Ultra, and just not the normal Thieves teams that we've seen before.
Yeah, and Scrap was pretty quiet. So was Hydra. It felt like Hydra wasn't even on the map. It wasn't like they were scared of him. It was just constant domination. All 4 Thieves players just not there. Ghosty not there. Scrap's not there. And that's when I was watching that match specifically, I was like, what is going on? And the control, also so weird that they just flop on that one. I'm going to switch gears again a little bit. We're going to follow another team in their bracket run. I'm curious. So this is my kind of hot take on this one. I think Cloud9 is actually better than the Surge and Ultra. I think that they just got absolutely wrecked by this bracket. Their first one, they 3-0'd the Ultra in a close series. Don't get me wrong. It was 248 to 250 in the hard point with the Ultra and Cloud9, a 5-6 Search, and then a 3-2 Hacienda Control that looked really close too. So those 2 teams are going at each other, but Cloud9 does take the Ultra down to send them to losers bracket so they go on their losers bracket run. Cloud9 then run into FaZe, who won the entire event, lose 3-1 in a close series. I think they took the control off of FaZe, and then they almost took the first hard point. They lost by 13 points, right? So I think Cloud9 beats the FaZe on that first hard point, and that's a different series. That's going game 5, and it might be a lot closer in the back end. And then Cloud9 fall to a losers bracket against the Thieves, who had been super hot to that moment, outside of their loss to the Breach, don't get me wrong, but had a full season. And then the Thieves 3-0'd Cloud9 at that point, right? And so I think the close match against Ultra where they squeak one by and then fall to FaZe and then fall to the Thieves. I mean, they played the 3 best teams outside of Surge in the whole tournament. Anybody agree or disagree?
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be like the toughest bracket. That's got like just a heartbreaking tournament for them in general. They played great. It's not even possible for a series to be closer than their series against Ultra and a 3-0. If Ultra had 1 more point in the hard point, then that's exactly how it would be closer. But otherwise, I mean, these guys played their hearts out, and I don't think their placing reflects it.
Yeah, I mean, I think coming into this tournament, right, and kind of what we talked about on the previous shows was, all right, we know our top 2, right? LA Thieves, FaZe.
Yeah.
Who's the middle of the pack, right? And I think that, I don't want to say we were wrong, right? But maybe we were. Maybe it's really just like, okay, you got FaZe, but at that time it's kind of LA Thieves, and then it's, instead of saying who's the middle of the pack, it's like, who's number 2? Because I feel like that's like, you could debate that in a lot of ways. Cloud9 looked phenomenal. I mean, to me, Ultra was a big surprise. I did not expect Ultra to do this, but I gained a lot of respect for Beans, Jodeci's in this tournament. Surge, I didn't put Surge in anything, right? We kept looking at these middle of the packs. Boston Breach even had its highlights, man. I mean, it's no easy feat just to beat LA Thieves like that. So Cloud9 did look really good. I mean, it's on land, and that's what matters, right? So now I start thinking, can Cloud9 win something? Maybe.
Maybe so, but they did ultimately fall in the losers bracket to the Thieves, who then got 3-0'd by Ultra. And then we see this Surge run, right? So the Vancouver Surge, I almost said Seattle. I stopped myself. The Vancouver Surge, they have a good winners round 1 and 2. They take down Royal Ravens and the Breach, who obviously was that upset against the Thieves. And then they meet FaZe in the winners finals. And they go game 5, the only game 5 of the whole event. Davis, do you think they should have taken that one?
There's only one answer.
I do, but but I will say, I mean, we're talking about FaZe here, and FaZe since the beginning of the CDL has been the team. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, they are the team, and they will, until someone proves me wrong, they will always be the team. And so I always put them at number one. I think it was a very tall task for the Surge to be able to upset them. They came very close. They probably should have, but not the biggest surprise to me. I think FaZe, was the rightful deserving winner.
Phased up.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be one moment that just haunts Surge, and that's going to be on that protocol search and destroy simp with that 1v2 clutch, man. That one round, I mean, obviously, right, one moment doesn't dictate the whole series, but that one round, I mean, really shifted that search and destroy, and I think it goes another way.
Yeah, Neptune misplayed it fully.
Yeah.
All you got to do is back up, and he was good, right?
Yep.
But he just decided to play this weird box and give Simp a little bit of space and just kind of take it. And that ultimately defined the whole event, because I think if Surge end up going to the grand finals through the winners, it's a little bit different when they see FaZe the next time. Because they then, after they lose to FaZe, they drop and they play a hot Ultra, who had won 4 series before that, just coming off of their win to the Thieves once again. And they played a close series against the Surge. So you saw the first hard point on Protocol, 239 to 250, going in the way of Surge. And then you see a close search, 6-4. And then ultimately, they almost took a control away. I think that control looked a little bit closer than these numbers say, but it was a 3-1. Eli, do you think that the Ultra could take down a Surge in a different life?
Yeah, I mean, in parallel realities, I feel like so many of these series could be different, right? It just comes down to there's some elements of RNG for sure. It's an extremely fast-paced game. It's all about fast twitch reflexes. Tiny little differences in how these fights go down can make a huge difference in the game overall. And Surge, I think, to me, just proved that they're the real deal. Like, a lot of people had question marks about this roster. Like, are they just good onliners? Like, is Neptune just this new online kid that's really good? But, I mean, they proved that they deserve to be there. I mean, they take FaZe to Game 5, narrowly lose it, and then they defeat the hottest team in the lower bracket pretty handily, in my opinion. Yeah, it was close, but, I mean, 3-1, ultimately taking down Ultra, who had just won the last 12 games in a row, including 3-0ing LA Thieves. And then Surge is like, nah, we're not worried about you. We want the rematch against FaZe. Grand Finals, different story, of course, but I think Surge deserved to be there.
I love the videos that have come out now of the Neptune memes from him trash talking Ultra. Just don't do that.
Yeah,
don't push
yeah.
my point. But yeah, I think Neptune really stepped up here, man. I mean, Surge, they impressed me a lot. So I think that I think that the results don't speak to this, but I think that they are probably number 2 team in the league, right? I really want to put them number 1. I think just team strats, team synergy. I mean, Neptune, Surge, I mean, the name kind of goes together with the logo, right? It's a trident. So there's a lot of synergy there, even in the naming, but Surge, easily a top 2 team. I would argue that if FaZe, I mean, I know it's a really dramatic scenario, but if FaZe just had different players, right? It wasn't Celium, Simp, right? Player for player, they're better, but team-wise, I think Surge has definitely made a case that they're a top team in the league.
Yeah, that FaZe roster has been around for a while.
Yeah.
Those 4 have played with each other outside of torzsi. I mean, the deadly trio, right? You have Celium, Abizi, and Simp, and it's those 3 have been good for a while. And they're going to continue to be good. I think they're going to be pretty dominant, especially if the Thieves can't show up and kind of bounce back from this whatever funk they just found this one event.
Because they're all so young, right?
They are, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have probably another 4 or 5 years before they're even Scump in his prime,
That's right.
his age.
Yeah, and Simp and Abizi have played together for a long time, and they play off each other really well.
Yeah. Really well.
Really well, absolutely. Any last notes on the FaZe before we switch gears?
FaZe?
FaZe up.
No, I mean, just expected performance. FaZe boys on lands, they're a different beast,
That's
man.
right.
Different beast. Yeah.
That's right. Okay, well, I think that's going to do it for the show today. I think we knocked it out. Congratulations to the FaZe for taking that major. We're definitely going to see them more throughout the year. I think they're going to be dominant. But we appreciate you watching Queued Up. Thanks for queuing up with us. We explored some different games. Put some comments below. Go ahead, subscribe. Go ahead and push all the buttons down there. We'll be back again later this week with our predictions for this upcoming weekend and all the matches going on in all these games. But thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.